I'm just making this up as I go along. Anybody need a pulley? I bought a new, well, old, new to me, 2009 Pontiac Vibe, aka Toyota Matrix. This car had still has, a 2.4 liter Toyota engine, the infamous oil burner. At some point during the life cycle of that engine, though, Toyota offered a rebuild kit where you could go in and change out the piston rings and a few other items and eliminate the oil burning issue. It's a great engine, really, other than that one little catastrophic flaw. However, I bought that 09 Vibe back in December for number one son to tool around town and go back and forth to college. And that was all well and good. Seemed to be working, you know, just fine. We were happy. I was happy with the purchase. It was great. I changed the oil right after I got the car, and then 3,000 mile mark came up. And I knew these engines were prone to burn some oil, so I checked the oil, and it was down kind of nearish the low mark. In other words, you got add and full, right? So it was kind of getting down near the add mark, and I thought, okay, yeah, it burns a little oil, no big deal. Burnt like, you know, whatever, maybe a quarter of a quart, maybe a half a quart, not sure. I didn't seem overly concerned by that. I added a little bit because I was like, well, I'm going to change the oil in a few days, and when it hits the 3,000 mile mark, I'll add a little bit, and didn't think anything about it. Until a few days later, number one son calls me on the phone and says, hey, I'm coming down the interstate and the car made a loud noise and it stopped and I had to pull over. He also said the oil light came on. He said all the oil is gone. I'm like, what's going on here? What's going on? Well, this is what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like for you to refer to Exhibit A. This is a Toyota 2.4 engine, the 2AZ-FE, I think they call it. It has exploded. It has ceased to be an engine. It is completely un-engine-like in every respect. You will note in Exhibit A, a large gaping hole in the bottom of the, I guess you might call this the engine block extension or maybe the upper oil pan, and another gaping hole in the block itself. Apparently, one of the piston rods decided that it was going to unbolt itself from the crankshaft, or possibly the piston, we're going to find out, and it didn't want to play anymore. It got flung around in there pretty fast and eventually found its way out. I suspect that rod is lying on I-65 south somewhere, but I'm not going to trouble myself with trying to figure out where it is. Where did that leave us? That left me with replacing the engine in our 2009 Vibe, which has already been done. I found a reputable shop, and they found an imported engine from Japan with 60,000 miles on it. The work's already been done, the car's back in service, and it's basically like a new car. Along the way, they found a couple of issues with the vehicle. They actually replaced both of the rear wheels. They said they were warped or bent. And honestly, when I was driving down the road in the car, it felt a little bouncy, but I just thought maybe, okay, it needs shocks, and I was going to get around to it, Nope. The wheels were bent. And so he put brand new wheels on the back, and they found and once you pull a motor out in the front end, you find stuff, right? So they found one of the CV axles, I think it was on the passenger side, was beginning to fail, and they also found a bad rear wheel bearing. So all of that stuff was covered by the original quote that they gave me, so I was pretty happy with that. They didn't jack the price up on me. They told me what it was going to cost me, and they stuck to it. So, okay, fine. I was happy with that. Got a new engine and some other new stuff as well. Car's back in service, and we're good to go. We're covered. However, I told them, I said, you know what? don't scrap that motor. I'm going to keep it because I've got plans for this little piece of junk. That involves basically disassembling this engine and for all of us to take a look at the inside and just basically see exactly what happens to a Toyota 2.4 engine when it decides to explode. And later on, we're going to strip the block down to its just bare essentials. And I've got other plans that I think are going to be a lot of fun. So you guys stick around for that. All right, I tell you what, up next, let me go ahead and get this little motor on that new engine stand I got right over there, and so we can start turning some wrenches. So we'll be back in just a moment. All right, we got the little 2.4 on the engine stand finally. That took me a little while. I had to go get the right size bolts. You need 12 millimeter by 1.25 thread pitch. You need a couple of those, and you need a couple of 10 millimeter by 1.25 pitch, and they both need to be 100 millimeters long, or about 4 inches. And I had to go to 3 different big box hardware stores to find them. So up next, I think I want to go ahead and take the front end down, and then go ahead and remove the head and the intake. I just want to make this thing a little bit more ungamely before we take a look at the bottom end. Let's go ahead and get started. How do you use this thing anyway? Let's go ahead and take the water pump pulley off. Man, this thing's great. Why didn't I buy one of these sooner? That was easy. I'm going to have a lot of leftover Toyota 2.4 parts, like maybe that bracket. There's an intake, a throttle body, you know, various bits and pieces. If anybody wants some Toyota 2.4 parts, you know, give me a jingle. Let's see. Let's go ahead and get the water pump off. I guess those are 10. Looks like some granular material up inside the water pump area. Looks a little shiny. Although the interior of that looks amazingly clean. I guess I should expect that from Toyota. I mean, these are great engines, aside from the fact that they put crap rings in them back in the day. So I'm just making this up as I go along. Anybody need a pulley? I wonder if there's a need for Toyota parts on eBay. Looks like a good tensioner unit. God, this thing is fantastic. These are 14, by the way. 19 millimeter. Look at that. Like it wasn't even there. Let's see. Is that a press on? I don't know. I feel a little bit of crankshaft in play. Just a little bit. Is there supposed to be any on a Toyota engine? Well, this engine is not a keeper, clearly, so I just want to examine it. So this is, I'm assuming this is a slight press fit, but I seem to be getting some movement with the pry bar. I'm going to keep parts of this engine and maybe sell some of the rest and scrap the rest. That's a very, it's not, I would not call it that a press fit. I would say that is a very tight slip fit. Pretty clean. Anybody need a crank pulley for a 2.4? I'm assuming this is a, it looks like the crank sensor. Now let's go ahead and get the timing cover off. Not sure what this is for. Maybe it's an access cover? Oh no, that's the, that's spring loaded. That is a, it's a thing. What is that? Oh, that's a pump. Squishy, squishy. It's doing stuff. I press this and that opens up and sprays air and stuff. Is that the oil pump? I don't know. Never done this before. I think that might be all the bolts off of the front cover. How about that? Kind of a spacer kind of a thing between the front cover and the engine block. Let's take that off. There's a crank sensor. Finally loosened up a little bit. Let's see. Hey, there's some progress. Got the top loose. Oh, there's a bolt in the middle. Ha ha! Rascal. Are there any other fasteners in plain sight that I'm missing? There we go. There's some sealant down below on the oil pan, so I may need to crack that oil pan off of there. All right, I decided to take the oil pan off. The mechanic who replaced the engine had actually taken it off earlier and then put it back on with 3 bolts, and I took those out and it fell down and made a big mess. And there's a comical array of parts in the oil pan. This engine must have instantaneously locked solid. It's amazing. I'm so baffled by how this engine could have catastrophically destroyed itself in a fraction of an instant. It's just unbelievable. So we'll take a look at that bucket of bolts there and parts and bearings and whatnot here in a little bit. But in the meantime, what I wanted to do was get that oil pan off here so I could get this timing cover off. And but first, let me get some oil dry and clean up this mess. I'll be right back. All right, got our little mess cleaned up here. There we go. There's our timing cover. Nothing wrong with that. Wonder if that's worth anything. All right, so let's go ahead and get this timing chain off here, and we'll get these cams out, and then we'll start pulling that head off and this intake. Not necessarily in that order, mind you. How does that come off of there? We'll figure that out later. Trying to figure out what size these bolts are here. Either somebody got in here and really messed them up. I've got a 10 millimeter, but 11 doesn't fit. That is just weird, man. Look away. Oh, that wasn't necessary. Because I don't know what I'm doing. Well, that's a heavy piece. I guess that's a balancing thing. That's like, you know. Yeah, that's a ticket. He doesn't know what he's doing. Well, no kidding. Let's take these camshafts out next. All right, I got that little sprocket off of there. Now we can get that chain off, get that little sprocket off. Hope you guys are taking good notes, because I'm not. All right, we'll do the intake next. This is 12 millimeter. Well, that was pretty easy. Making a mess. Get some oil dry underneath there. All right, got that intake off. That cleaned things up quite a bit. What do we do now? I'm looking for some hints here, people, okay? Let's take the top end apart next. How about that? Let's do that. Can we just do that? Whoopsie. Boy, you got to hold your mouth just right to keep this stuff from just falling all over the place. All right, those camshafts actually look pretty good. All right, there's your top of your 2.4. Pretty clean in there. Just a little, I don't see any sludge really. Just, you know, mild amber discoloration from oil over the years. And this bearing surface for the, there's a little bit of wear right there. You can see the discoloration there. But nothing catastrophic. The catastrophic end is in the bottom part. All right, let's go ahead and take these head bolts out. These are triple square bolts. But one of them, I noticed, I wanted to locate all of them, and one of them is underneath this bearing here. There we go. No problemo. All right, I'm going to show you the complications. This is the head bolt I started on. It's right in the middle. Put my 12 millimeter triple square in there, and it stripped the interior out. So now I have to make a decision on whether or not to just stop right here and say to heck with it, or get in there and start drilling that bolt out. But then again, you know, what's the you know, the rest of them? What kind of problems are gonna give me? Something else I found: the valves, they all look like that, all of them, except this guy right here. And you can see it's open. And you can see that valve on the left. Look at that rascal. It is bent. Man, it's bent. I mean, it is screwed, man. And that one's bent some, but it's hard to tell on the camera. Anyway, so both the valves are bent here. So clearly, if I had to take a stab, let's see. I believe that is where the holes are on the engine. Yeah. So number 3, I'm assuming that's number 3, counting from the front of the engine. It looks like that's the rod that flew off and slammed, basically locked up the entire drivetrain and everything for cylinder number 3. Let's take a look at the exhaust valves. The exhaust valves are closed. I don't really see any issues there. The intake is totally hosed though. So, okay, got to figure out how I'm going to get this head off of here. All right, I made a pretty serious mistake. Assumed that these were simple triple square head bolts. They're not. I should have watched somebody else's video on YouTube prior to me screwing this up, but I pulled out this triple square that I had. Seemed to fit fine, but these are not triple square. These are 12-point double hex, and that's what Toyota uses. They're not, I repeat, triple square. So Google up the difference between triple square and 12-point double hex fasteners on the internet there, and you'll find out all about it. Of course, I'm ignorant on these engines, so that being said, I was able to slowly drill out the center of this cap here, this the head of this bolt. And I was using about a 7/16 inch bit. I'm not sure how big it was, but anyway, I went down through the center of it and was basically drilling the same diameter as the bolt itself. And I got down far enough, and there wasn't enough metal left behind, and the head just popped right off. So that should just slide right out. Where does that leave me? That means I have to get a 12-point double hex bit. Amazon's going to bring that to me tomorrow, so I think I'm at a standstill right now. You can see all my drilling residue in that one, on that one I screwed up there. So hopefully the rest of them will go okay once I get the proper tool. And all right, so we will leave it right here, and we'll be back tomorrow. All right, I broke these bolts loose off camera with a long breaker bar, and of course the new bit. This thing wouldn't cut the mustard. One of them I stripped out because I was using the triple square, as I told you earlier, but I went and got the right tool, and that worked wonderfully. However, this bolt right here, second one from the end, stripped out anyway. It started to strip out, and I was like, whoop, I stopped. And I started looking at it, and it looks like somebody's been in there before. I think this head's been off of the engine before. Somebody's been in this motor, done something to it, and tried to repair it badly, and that's why it failed. Over the last 2 or 3 months, while we had been driving the car, you know, I heard a little rattle at idle, and once you give it the gas and go, it smoothed on out and sounded wonderful. It just ran great. I just thought it was a piece of plastic trim rattling at idle, but I don't think it was, because the rattle's no longer there, and I think it was a rod knock, which is hilarious because it didn't sound like a rod knock that I've ever heard. Clearly, I don't know anything about Toyota engines, so let's move on. I've got all these broken loose. Every time I think about that, it's just hilarious. Let me go ahead and loosen these bolts. We'll get these out of here. Man, they're whoppers too. Look at that. This oil, when I take the bolt out of the engine, oh, it stinks. It's just awful. Whoa, look out now. What are you trying to do to me? Why did that try to lift the head off of the engine? That's just crazy talk. Okay, this thingamajig here, I don't know what it is. That is the cam sensor. I do believe it is a cam sensor, and a piece of it is sticking out right there, and the bolt hit it. So let's go ahead and just push on through. There we go, they're all loose now. And what I'm gonna do is, so truth be known, I had surgery like 5 weeks ago, so nothing life-threatening or anything, but just some maintenance that needed to get done. So my doctor said, don't you be lifting anything for 6 weeks. Okay, fine. I got 1 more week. I'm gonna use the engine hoist to lift the head off of the motor, even though I don't think it's very heavy, well, maybe 30 pounds, but that's actually more than I'm supposed to be lifting. So we won't do that. I'm gonna give it another couple of weeks, and then I can return to my normal operating routine. So for now, let's move this over here and hook it up and get this head off of this block. What in the world is going on now? Thought I got all the bolts out. Oh, duh. The 2 studs that are still in there because I had to cut the heads off. Moron. And we'll need to just, yeah, there we go. All right, I got it to release in a fashion that was unsafe and not fit for video. Ooh, boy. Look at the state of number 3. Oh my goodness, I got to get you guys in here and take a look at this thing. Clearly it crashed against the valves, so let's take a look at that. All right, that piston is basically shattered. You can see the metal right there, and there's pieces of it and debris and all kinds of mean, nasty, ugly things. That piston is basically cracked in half. I have, you know, some plans for this engine. I know that sounds kind of weird, and it involved all of the pistons being intact. That one, you can tell, that sounds solid. That sounds broken, hollow. Oh, mercy. Okay, well, we got the head off. Thing to do now is go ahead and flip this guy over and take the bottom end out. This engine is completely and utterly trashed, exploded. It's just unbelievable. All right, look at that. We can take our bolts out now. These head bolts are actually, they're surprisingly easy to drill out. You just have to get a bit and just drill down through the head of the bolt, and it took me about 10 minutes per bolt. You just want to use a lot of lubrication, and that's what the end of it looks like when you're done. Wasn't that hard, really. I was pretty pleased with it. Anybody interested in a slightly used head gasket? It's probably gonna, I wonder if we're gonna get some spillage, probably. Of course. Ooh, what's that thing? He doesn't know anything about, oh, that's the outside of the, it's a plastic thingy around the cylinder liners. Plastic inside an engine block. That's kind of weird. Okay. All right, we'll get you over here. Let's take a look, do a preliminary look at the bottom end. I want to show you the gnarliest crankshaft bearing race on the planet. Just unbelievable. I don't think, you know, you'd have to be here to look at this. It's just mangled beyond recognition of any kind of piece of machinery that would do anything useful. Just unbelievable. And as I suspected, the rod is the rod in there? I was kind of hoping it was, but I guess not. I think clearly it shot out of the block and it's laying on the interstate. So, all right. Up next, I'm going to go ahead and take the bottom end off of this block. I guess we'll start with the dipstick tube. Will that come out of there? Yep, there we go. Let's see, what size bolts? What size bolts? What is that, about a 12, 13? What is that? Hey, look at that, right out of the gate. 12 millimeter. I'm just taking bolts off that I think need to come off, really. That must be the oil pump. Yeah, that's a ticket. Since it's near the oil filter, one would think, hey, look at that. One slightly used oil pump, but again, I'm assuming that's what that is. On the floor with ye. Is that all the bolts for the bottom part? How many of you guys have taken one of these engines apart? Go ahead and comment below. I never have. You know, I don't know jack about these motors. I know that this piece right here is the internal engine balancing system. Engine balancing cams, I believe they're called. And they're located here. You got these two cam looking things with some off-centered weights on them, and those gears interact with the crankshaft gear to internally balance the engine. The only reason I know that is because I talked to the mechanic that educated me, the guy that did the engine swap. So might have missed another one, I don't know. That oil filter is tiny. I think I bought one for this motor a while back. All right, I think this is the one I got. Yeah, there we go. This little rinky-dink thing. Works fine though. Hey, there's no oil in there. It's all on I-65. I have no idea if this is the right thing to do, but a 12 millimeter Allen fits nicely in that oil filter housing. Yeah, I don't guess that was really necessary. It was kind of cool though. Is there a bolt in there? Guess where the last bolt was hiding? Now it'll come off. I can guarantee it. Look at that. Now that's a lightweight item there. All right, we're going to take the bottom engine block extension thingy off. It is full of aluminum or some kind of metal and has big gaping holes in it. That's pretty cool. All right, I tell you what, the previous owners of this car were not diligent in their oil changes. That is very, very clear. Yeah, this engine was, I don't know if it was abused, it just wasn't maintained properly. And yeah, boy, that's what it'll get you right there, folks. This is what happens when you don't change the oil in your engine, okay? It says everything for itself, right? And this happens, see? All right, up next, we'll go ahead and remove the main bearing caps, and we'll pull the crankshaft out of this engine. All right, we're going to try to get this crankshaft out of this motor. This thing's locked up tight because, well, of the way that it is, as they say. So I'm going to go ahead and take the main cap bolts loose. Don't have to worry about number 3 rod. However, I can get to the bolts for the remaining rods as well. And after that, we should be able to just lift the whole thing out of there. This is a 14 millimeter 12 pointed socket because these are 12 pointed bolts. Man, that stinks. That oil. You could tell this motor was just not maintained. The oil in this thing is just burnt up. All right, 12 millimeter, 12 point. That piston started to slide out. That one ain't, because it's already slid out. Ha ha. Need a little tappy tap action going on there, I think. Note to self, the bolt must be completely removed. Yeah, that's, holy cow, that bearing stayed in there. Huh. I guess the reason behind the stinkiness is the oil starvation. It just burned itself up. You know, that bearing stayed there on the crank. That bearing stayed on the crank. That rod bearing was spun. It just went around that way. Oh well, don't worry about it. All right, let me get these last two rod bearings off here, and I'll be right back. Yeah, this, oh my goodness. All these, I think most of all these rod bearings spun. That main bearing's trashed. That one's trashed. It just, oh my goodness. And this front main bearing is just destroyed. Look at that. Carnage, baby, carnage. Yeah, I was watching this Toyota expert on YouTube, and he described this as a, accurately I might add, a boat anchor. A blown engine, clearly, so. Oh, those bounce really easy. Let's see. Yeah, I've got movement there. No movement down here. This back end's probably stuck into the seal. Yeah, the seal. Let's take the seal off. That might help. Fine. Yeah, I got movement that way. That's pretty heavy. So I'm going to set this head on the ground, get these chains hooked up to the, wrapped around the crank in some kind of fashion, and lift that crank out of that engine. Because I'm not supposed to be lifting stuff, so I'm not going to do it. All right, let me change all this stuff around and get this crank out of the block. All right, got this crankshaft pulled out of this engine. It's pretty stubborn, it didn't want to come out. The rod bearing on number one was, well, it's hard to say really, not really. It was welded to the rod. You know, I think we can accurately say that. Let me, man alive. Okay, let me get this out of here. Pull this block back and we'll give you another shot of some of that carnage. So there's the number one rod bearing right there, which was, yeah, it was completely and utterly welded to the rod itself. And the engine just seized on the interstate. I mean, it just seized immediately. I don't know if the engine lost oil and then seized, or if the rod flew off and then punched a hole in the block, lost oil and seized. I don't know, but regardless, so it's time to move on, clearly. Up next, I'm going to go ahead and get these pistons out of here. I think just a good old hammer will suffice. There we go. That was easy. And that's the one that's missing the rod and, you know, everything pretty much. I was going to try to, the skirt is even gone. That's what these bits are. I was wondering, why does that piston look weird? It's because the skirt of the piston is completely destroyed. I mean, that's what all these bits are. That's the piston skirt. I was kind of expecting these to be seized in the bores. It certainly wasn't the piston rings that seized this engine. So you can see these rings up here, the top ones are somewhat pliable. The middle one is okay-ish. And these guys down here are supposed to be the one, you know, the first line of defense. They're supposed to have some springy action to them. They have maybe a tiny bit, but not much. All right, there you go. All torn down, except for a couple of little minor tidbits that I'll remove in a little while. The bits of piston skirt are falling out of the bottom of the block. That's somewhat comical. I think the demise of this engine is simply related to the previous owners running it out of oil, and, you know, probably ran it out of oil multiple times, and eventually just destroyed the bottom end. So I think it's pretty much lack of maintenance, and then possibly somebody was into this engine later on to try to address a few issues, and it got put back together poorly, and they just hastened the demise. So there you go. This is what poor maintenance will get you on any engine, really. So I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of little minor things off here and there, a couple little bolts and brackets, and then we're going to take this thing outside and degrease it. All right, we're back to the mobile paint booth slash engine cleaning area. Yeah, that's the ticket. And we've got some super clean in the old bottle here. And we're going to soak this guy down and get a bristle brush after it and some water and all that kind of jazz, and going to clean her up. All right, there she is, cleaned up well enough. Got as much dirt on this off of this side as I could, and got it cleaned up pretty well for my purposes. And this side, the back side of the engine nearest the firewall, a lot cleaner obviously. And the part that had the carnage is a lot dirtier, but that's okay. Going to go ahead and wipe out the inside of these bores, put a little WD-40 down in there to keep those steel liners from rusting. So I'm assuming that's what they are. All right, we got the block cleaned up pretty well here. I took a die grinder to the top of the block, or the deck rather, and shined that up pretty good. And I think paint is going to address the rest of the nastiness on the side of the block. Probably need to take the die grinder and get the remnants of this gasket off as well. But right now I want to take care of the interior of these cylinders. I want to shine them up a little bit. And I went and got myself a hone, and we're going to do that next. All right, some nice automotive sandable primer. Not that it needs to be sanded, mind you, but you know, we don't need high heat stuff because it's never going to see high heat again. Let me put a primer coat on this, and we'll come back with a nice top coat. All right, we're going to let our primer coat dry, and then we'll come back with our top coat. I think we're going to go with silver. All right, time for the top coat. Oh yeah, I think that's going to look real nice. All right, we're just cruising right along. Top coat is done, and we got the deck polished and got the cylinders honed and wiped out. Kind of hard to see in the daytime though, however, but they're nice and shiny down in there. And we got some bolts here. I have some of these clear rubber stops that you use for, you know, tabletops and cabinets and things. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you haven't figured out what I'm doing yet, then, you know, hey, you know, you will here in a moment. All right, there you go. Nice glass top here. So, if you haven't figured this out already, I'm I'm a huge Top Gear fan. So thought to myself, you know, an engine block coffee table would be pretty cool in the upstairs office of the shop, which I plan to start decorating, hopefully pretty soon. So there we are. Now, what do I do about feet? I suppose you could leave this as it is and just set the block on the floor. However, I am debating on whether or not I want to do that. I have some ideas about feet because I was going to use pistons, but I only have 3, and you need 4 really for that. So, all right, a little more head scratching, and hopefully we'll finish this little project up. All right, the bolts were a little wobbly because I only screwed them in, you know, 2 or 3 threads, but I decided to go ahead and just send them all the way home so that they're tight in the block, just finger tight, but they're all the way down. So that really firmed it up. It's not wobbly anymore. And I think the height, it looks better that way. I think it was a little too tall off the deck. So that begs the question of the feet next. So all right, so I went with 4 of the bolts that held the bottom of the skirt, or you know, bottom part of the block onto the block itself. I got all the heads the same distance, so hopefully that won't be too wobbly. Had another idea of maybe taking a piece of copper pipe or some kind of pipe and with a washer here, right, and set the copper pipe, 4 of them all the same length, and put it down on the bolt, and then put the washer here and then tighten the bolt down, so then you have, you know, 4 relatively rigid legs. I may do that, so I'll be right back. All right, I think that'll work. That's a piece of copper pipe. It came out of the house. I recently had some air conditioning work done, and some of the copper pipe was pulled out and replaced. Had some bigger stuff installed in the house AC system, so had that left over. Cleaned it up with the grinder, with the wire wheel on the drill press, and I'm going to cut all of them to 4 1/4 inches. That way I can be rest assured that you know, all the legs will be even. So I'll use the pipe cutter for that. Shouldn't take but a few minutes, really. All right, there we go. Got legs. 1/2 inch, I guess it's 1/2 inch copper pipe. cut to 4 1/4, and then put the original bolts back in there, and should be stable. And if it's a little off, then I can put, you know, some pads underneath these. All right, she's all done. Got the top back on there. I got these bolts fully seated down into the block. Got some little bushings on there to protect the glass. It's nice and sturdy. And I've got some copper legs on there. I was looking up on the internet. I don't know how high a coffee table is supposed to be. Around 16 or 17 inches, something like that, which is what the distance between this glass and the bottom of these legs is. So that should work out pretty well. Man, look at that cool car. All right, now we're all done. I tell you what, let's go ahead and get this thing inside and go ahead and finish up our video. Well, there you are, folks. I told you we were going to do something fun with the little 2AZ-FE Toyota piece of junk, engine. And here we are. We got a nice little coffee table. I went down to the thrift shop and bought an end table and basically just kept the glass out of it. That was 20 bucks. And the glass is held up with the original head bolts. And I've got some rubber things from the big box so that it won't slide around. And I used the regular bolts that came out of the engine for the feet and put some copper pipe around that to firm it up. And that worked out really well. All in all, I'm pretty pleased with it. And I think what I'm going to do is put this upstairs in the shop office whenever I get around to remodeling it, or actually modeling it, since how do you remodel something that's never been, never mind. Anyway, I need to work on it. I've got lights and I've got insulation, but I need to put some wall coverings up and do some other things and turn it into a proper office. And I think over the next few months, that'll be a sideline project for me. The LED lighting was just an added touch I thought might be kind of cool. And I've got it tucked away over here. You can't really see it in the camera, but it's got a remote control on it. And these things are just a blast. I use them at Talladega when I go to the car races and put them all over the camper on the outside. There's red and green and blue and white. Hey, I think I sense a pattern. Red, white, and blue. I kind of like those colors, don't you? I do. I tell you what, I like those three colors a lot. You can also do, let's see, let's do a flash. Flash! Ah! And then what do we got? Fades. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. You can get this LED kit for like 15 bucks on Amazon, and it's pretty reliable and it works. It's pretty neat. All right, folks, we're gonna wrap this video up. And just like to say that, you know, that engine in that Pontiac blew up on me. And that was pretty, you know, that was pretty terrible. That was pretty awful, really. I was really, really disappointed. And especially since I had to deal with the expense of replacing the engine. I like the car. It's a good car. The engine was crap, but, you know, the car's pretty good. So if the car had been not so good, I would have just got another vehicle. But since the car was pretty good, I decided to go ahead and replace the engine. You know, it's like the old saying goes, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Well, if you don't like lemonade, at least you can make a place to keep your favorite beverage. And I just happen to have one on hand. And this table suits the bill quite nicely, I think. All right, folks, that's all for now. I appreciate you guys stopping by the channel and watching me pretty much stumble through all these videos, and this one was education for me. So again, I appreciate you guys stopping by the channel, and don't forget to press that like button for me if you would. That would really help my channel out tremendously. And also share it amongst your friends and any other car enthusiasts or knuckleheads that you might happen to know. You guys have a good one, and remember to try something new once in a while. You know, just get out there and shake it up. Try something a little bit different. You never can tell. You might just succeed and create something that's pretty nice.